we've wanted the same goal, but we wanted to get there in different ways. And so it's been hard at times to like find that balance.
Yeah.
I find that I look very like immediate. I focus on like what's happening right now, like how is the family doing? How are the kids feeling? And I have goals for the future, but I also want to make sure that everybody's needs are met right now in the present. Whereas Jesse, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he focuses, like his main focus is the end game, like the long game. He's like, where do I want our family to be financially, like down the road? And so I need to make these steps now. And he is like a go-getter. Like he will do what he has to like make it happen. But then there are times where he wants to just keep powering through to like make it happen. And I'm like, no, we need you at home. Like the kids want to see you. But his mindset is like the provider mindset.
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to episode 13 of Disrupt the Everyday. Today we'll be hitting on a couple topics. We'll be discussing entrepreneurship in the form of real estate investing, as well as balancing that with family life after getting a diagnosis for a child. In this case, we'll be talking about Williams syndrome. And our guests today are Kaleena and Jesse Schultz. Jesse and Kaleena, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Now, as we get to know each other here, I just want to give you the opportunity to give some context and let us know who exactly Kaleena and Jesse Schultz are.
It's one of those questions that I feel like people ask me, and it like you can go in many different directions with this and how you're going to answer it. We're a married couple, I guess, if we're getting down to the basics. We've got 3 kids and 2 of them are in school, and our youngest one is 2 years old. And almost a year ago, we got a diagnosis for her. She was diagnosed with Williams syndrome. So we have been navigating that, as well as all of the stuff that's happening in the world the last year. That's been new for us. And I don't know, I guess we're kind of entrepreneurs. We like to try different things and put ourselves out there. And you, Jesse, more so than me, wear many hats when it comes to like the entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty recent. I guess a pretty recent way to identify where we're at is thinking entrepreneurially or that way. But sometimes it's easier to describe who we are by the things that we do, although I would say that value comes from a different place, but it is a little bit easier to relate to saying some of the things that we do. So I would say one thing that kind of defines us is we were kind of intentional about being able to keep Kaleena at home with the kids after we had our second. And I think that's been a bit of I would say, part of our family culture that we've tried to keep intact. And then more recently, creating the circumstances to kind of preserve that and prioritize family time and availability and that kind of thing. So that's where we're at, maybe what we're learning.
So how long have you guys been together? I feel like it's been a while.
I lost track now. 11 years?
Yeah. We've been married 11 years.
Yeah.
And then we kind of dated maybe for like a year. Yeah. And then, we were engaged for about 6 months. Yeah.
So if you want the detailed answer, there you go.
That would be Brian on our side too. I'm not so good with dates. He remembers everything.
Yeah. The trick is, I was telling somebody this the other day, but if you ever get asked in public how long you've been married and you can't remember, you just say not long enough.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Wow. You can't lose with that answer. Jeez. That's good.
Oh man. So question for you, because we're a couple of years ahead of you guys. So as time has gone on, how have you guys, I guess you could say, evolved, grown together with different goals that you may have, if that makes sense?
And just to give context, when she says we're a little bit ahead of you guys, we've just been married 2 years longer. That's what she means.
All right. Right. Yeah. So just a squeak ahead. Well, I would say at the beginning, there's a lot of stuff to figure out that neither of us had done before. Like, so we hadn't really lived on our own before. Like when we got married, that's when we started a life together and kind of away from home. We both did a discipleship program called School of Ministry out of Toronto. And so that's where we met, actually. I was only there for about 5 or 6 months, just for one term. And then Kaleena was there as an intern for a year after that. That was probably our only like time away from home, so to speak. And it was pretty cushy. It wasn't that hard. So I guess like learning life together at the beginning, we had a lot of common goals, and a lot of them were around kind of like making ends meet and kind of figuring out how to adult together. And I remember when we started talking about having kids, we were in this really cool 2-bedroom apartment downtown Kitchener. It kind of felt like a loft. It had really high ceilings. We drove by it the other day and we're like, man, that was a cool spot, wasn't it? So, but that kind of period, I guess, what stands out to me is thinking about transitioning to the next, which is like home ownership for us, I guess. And we kind of had this period where we were, logically it made sense. We wanted to find a house first and kind of prepare ourselves for that. But we also kind of felt this increasing desire to try for a family. And so, we were kind of back and forth about what should we do kind of first. And I think after praying a little bit, I know I personally, I didn't have the peace to pursue getting a house, but I did have peace about trying to start a family. And even though logically, I probably would have tried to do those things in reverse, I kind of had to be open-handed with that. And then we did end up getting pregnant. And then after that, both the sense of peace to pursue getting a house and the opportunity came up, and we're able to get into a house before we had Avery. And
a lot has happened in those years, though. That is like, we decided to have a baby. I think we were already 3 years into marriage at that point. And now we're like, fast forward at 11 years, and we can both say that we're very different people now from like even when we were just dating. Life weathers you a little bit too.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes people have these like fairy tale answers to like how things fell into place, and where I feel like there has been a lot of parts in our life where it did feel like things just fell into place for us. Like if it was fate, if it was God, it just like felt like things just kind of worked out. But there has been a lot of times too where we haven't been on the same page right away.
Yeah.
And we haven't had the same goals, or we did, but they looked differently. And like more recently, when we started pursuing real estate investments, or real estate properties, I should say, investment properties, there we go. That whole thing, we've wanted the same goal, but we wanted to get there in different ways. And so it's been hard at times to like find that balance.
Yeah.
I find that I look very like immediate. I focus on like what's happening right now, like how is the family doing? How are the kids feeling? And I have goals for the future, but I also want to make sure that everybody's needs are met right now in the present. Whereas Jesse, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like he focuses, like his main focus is the end game, like the long game. He's like, where do I want our family to be financially, like down the road? And so I need to make these steps now. And he is like a go-getter. Like he will do what he has to like make it happen. But then there are times where he wants to just keep powering through to like make it happen. And I'm like, no, we need you at home. Like the kids want to see you. But his mindset is like the provider mindset. Like, I'm going to do what I have to do to make sure my family is set financially to help us reach these goals. And so we sometimes have to like still now have to like find that balance with how do we meet both of our needs, our immediate and our like future goals and dreams.
Yeah, I would not disagree with you.
I can definitely relate. I know that I'm like you, Kaleena, and Brian's very much like you, Jesse. And I think, if we were both the same, that would be a problem as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice to have that two different people looking at things totally different. But then also the main thing is just having that focus and trying to keep things realigned. So when things feel like they're getting off kilter,
Right.
it's like, okay, you know what? Hold up.
Yeah.
That can wait for tonight. We need you here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
And I find that I actually need those conversations, because I just get so in my head, and I try to keep so many plates spinning, because I'm thinking about productivity and sort of the long view, and it just makes so much sense to me. It feels so natural to be in that spot that I can be a little bit oblivious to what's happening in the moment. So that's, as much as Kaleena would like me to just kind of know where she's at and like where things are at, I need a bit of a prompt. Like, no, it'd be nice to have you at home during this time. Okay. And we're trying, like, we've tried to work out some boundaries of like when I,
like time blocking.
Yeah, when I can kind of like be out of the house taking care of stuff, and it's kind of like the Wild West. You do what you got to do out there, but then after that point, I want you to be back here, and
This is your time block. You use that however you want to use it, get your stuff done. But then outside of that block of time, we would love to have you like at home. Just
yeah, we just ran into this week. Like, I had something come up where I was like, hey, I have to go take care of this. And it was like after picking up the kids from school, and
it was outside of the block.
Yes, it was outside of the block. And I was like, why are you so upset about this? Like, I just need to get this done. And she was like, what about this agreement? Like, is it that important? And I needed to like kind of rewind a little bit, and really I had to talk down the importance of what I felt that I needed to do, because the reality of it is that I could wait until the next day. But that in me, again, that natural sort of innate sense of like
the drive,
I
call it.
I got to make it happen. It just, I was blindsided by her questioning why I needed to go do that after, like over supper time. So it's just how easy it is for that to happen.
Yeah, no, I think the time blocking is key. Like, I have to put everything in my calendar, or else it's either just not going to get done, or I'm going to forget about it, because much like you, trying to spin a lot of different plates, but you gotta, it's all about that balance and just making sure that you're getting the priorities taken care of. And again, I can relate to what you're saying. It's hard sometimes to leave something unfinished, but if you can understand that it doesn't have to be done right now, it could definitely help.
So can we talk a little bit about your family? So we learned a little bit about the background of relationships. When you guys were introducing yourselves, you talked about your 3 kids, and you talked about Thea and her diagnosis that you guys got a year ago about Williams syndrome, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I had never heard about it until I had been on your blog and I was reading, and you had said 1 in 10,000 babies, I guess you would say, are diagnosed with this. So can you share with us what Williams syndrome is?
Yeah, it is. So Jesse and I were just talking about this earlier too, how we're like, it's still kind of new to us. It's been like about a year since she's got like an official diagnosis. And when people ask us, I'm like, I feel like there's so many different answers you could give them. People aren't necessarily always concerned in like the science behind it. But I know for me, if I was in somebody else's shoes asking about their child, the things that I would want to know is like, what makes them different, or what are the challenges that they might face, or like the different journey that they're on that makes them unique. So I guess, the science of it is she is missing a few genes on chromosome 7. So if you're a sciencey person, that's that answer. And so she has characteristics that are, I guess, more visible than others to people. So one of the genes that she's missing is like the elastin gene. So she is very flexible, very stretchy. And also with that, we have to like be careful with her joints. So she can't really play contact sports and stuff because she doesn't have that gene.
It's funny. That was one of the, like, when we first got the blood work done through a geneticist, and they talked us through like, okay, so you have a diagnosis, and kind of here's what. It's funny that their description of how like her flexibility and stuff was a description of like, well, she probably can't play hockey or rugby. And I guess it's kind of funny because, you know, it wasn't the first place that I went was seeing this little girl.
Yeah, it's so
like,
tiny.
yeah.
Like, okay.
Okay, I guess not. But just, I mean, to give an example, if she's sitting here like this, like sitting on her bum, sometimes she'll just like raise her foot while she's still sitting, raise her foot like above her head.
Yeah.
Like,
don't try.
yeah, I can't.
He's like about to demonstrate.
It just happens. It happens so naturally, like and effortlessly. So it's just kind of.
So for her, because she has that, it's taken her a long time, like longer than the average kid, to like learn how to sit up, learn how to stand, learn how to crawl, because she would just fold in half. Like she doesn't have the muscle tone, she doesn't have the ab strength. And so that's one of the things that we're currently working on with therapy. And so in a lot of ways, like if anyone's familiar with like the developmental milestones of a child, she is pretty much behind on all of them.
Yeah.
So things like talking, learning how to feed herself, learning how to stand up and crawl. And we are hopeful that she will get there. And that's why we're seeking support with therapy to like give us the tools we need to like help her get there. It just takes her a bit longer.
Yeah. One of the things that's it's pretty typical when describing a new condition or a new syndrome or that kind of thing. One thing that's pretty typical is speaking about it in terms of deficits, like what this person can't do, or something that removes them further away from like a normal archetype. Unfortunately, it focuses on deficits, but it's often a very accessible way for people to understand disability, is how it's different from maybe what you would expect. But so I guess, sorry, just to hit on one more deficit type description, is that Williams syndrome typically also involves some kind of cardiovascular issues. So, and that was actually the thing that kind of tipped us off. So she had a heart murmur.
Still does.
Yeah, still does. But we went to go get it checked out, and there were a couple spots where there were some narrowing of some valves. And one spot in particular is indicative and common in people with Williams syndrome. And so it was actually the cardiologist that suggested that we investigate if there's anything genetic that's causing that. And thankfully, she hasn't required any surgeries or anything, but there are a number of other kids at this point that have already had pretty serious heart surgeries and that kind of thing. And she's been doing okay. You know, the one spot, I guess, has kind of corrected itself. And then the other one that's my understanding, that's a little bit more typical of those with Williams syndrome, remains. But as far as we can tell, it doesn't seem to have an impact on her life at this point. So we're very thankful for that. But one of the other main characteristics of Williams syndrome is that people with Williams are often very friendly, very social, and very empathetic. So that is,
they call it the cocktail personality.
Yeah, they're just kind of like happy to schmooze and talk to everybody. So I think we can kind of see that a little bit in her for sure. Most of the time, she's very content.
Oh yeah, like 99% of the time, she's happy. She was not a great sleeper, I will say that.
Yeah.
So, but she's like just pleasant. She's just happy, and
it just like, she just kind of draws that out of people, like, because she's so kind of friendly and just yeah, she's got a cute little face, man. It's just like it's hard not to smile when she's just being herself. So that is one of the main characteristics of Williams as well.
Okay. So I had read in your blog, and Jesse, this is pertaining, I guess, mostly to you, because I'm just going to talk about men. So, you know, I'm no expert, but I'm just thinking back to, you know, our family situations and when there's been stressful times and stuff like that. The man is usually the one who offers that support, right? So you receive this, you know, news last year, and, you know, maybe you thought something was up, maybe you had no idea, I'm not sure, but Kaleena, you may have been broken. Like there were so many
Mhm.
thoughts, right, going through your head, and
Mhm.
Jesse, you're there to support. And you wrote, I believe that she can have a great life, an enviable life even. I believe that there will be lots of opportunity for her to pursue her interests and dreams. We'll just need to put the work in to equip her for success. Perhaps different measures, but is that not what we would do for Avery and Remy as well? Or any
Mm,
other parent for their children, regardless of need?
yeah.
So it's so true, right? Like there may be people listening that, their children don't have a syndrome, a disease, but there's so many that have different disabilities that come up, or just even some setbacks along the way. So my question to you, Jesse, is how did you feel receiving this news as a dad?
Yeah. I think leading up to that, I had kind of positioned my heart a little bit that that something was going on already. I mean, I was probably a little bit hyper vigilant with Avery and Remy too, about kind of looking for signs of some kind of abnormality or something. You know, at one point I was concerned about them having autism or different things. And I think a lot of that is because of working in developmental services
Mhm.
and you know, seeing certain characteristics and behavior and those kinds of things. So I, I had kind of made room for, like, I probably overanalyzed things just because of my experience. But then with Thea, I think there were a couple things that, yeah, just a couple of things that I kept seeing that I kind of thought, I think there's something up here. And, you know, we had done the work we had done the blood work, and then it still took like 6 months or something for them to get back to us. And so kind of in that time, I had kind of, yeah, I just kind of had made room for having to deal with something like this. I mean, as best as you can without really like committing to a certain idea. But two things I think kind of were helpful in the initial stages. So one is, with the background in working in developmental services, and particularly at Christian Horizons, that's the organization that I work for, there is a strong emphasis on valuing people and looking for innate gifts and how to create the opportunity for those to be explored. And so the framework of having a possibilities mindset is something that I've already been kind of practicing for the people that I support. I have supported, you know, over the last decade, which sounds weird to say, but it's been that long. But that's sort of, I remember specifically one of the first things that I said, I spoke over Thea when we got the diagnosis. I just remember holding her and saying, you're going to be able to pursue all of the things that you're interested in. You're going to be able to pursue all of the opportunities that you're interested in, and we will do what it takes for you to enjoy life. And I just remember like wanting to bless her with that, you know, kind of in the face of having a diagnosis. You know, the thing is, she was already here, she was already alive, she was already having life before we got a diagnosis. She already had the genetic condition before we had somebody speak to us that here's what's happening, you know.
Mhm.
So I wanted to speak into her just something that wasn't based on a diagnosis. And having that experience, I think, was really helpful. I think I said there were two things. I can't remember if I said two of them, but one of the other thing was, it was definitely harder for Kaleena, and she can speak more about it. But yeah, a lot of the like initial response, you go through like a lot of emotions pretty quickly, and a lot of like, I feel like we kind of went through like the stages of grief pretty rapidly, like over the course of a week, kind of like sadness, kind of mourning of the loss of what seems like a lot of
Mhm.
possibility, and you know, a lot of what ifs and different things. And yeah, so I felt like it was Kalina's time to kind of like go through some of that stuff. And it seems to happen that way, that when we kind of go through different things, the other person kind of pivots and has strength for a little while, and then we kind of switch. So we've had periods of that for various reasons, but I think initially I was definitely in that more like, I'll show strength now.
Now, what are some of the ways that you've adapted your life or your lifestyle to really make sure that Thea has all those advantages and opportunities that you want to give her?
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly about it, and then Kaleena can chime in, because she's definitely taken more of the lead with like the actual like practical efforts to help her, like seeking professional help and that kind of thing. But so I would say probably one of the biggest factors is that I changed my work schedule. But that happened before we had a diagnosis, before it was clear that there was anything different about Thea. She was still young. She was only 6 months. So at that point, like, milestones are a little bit more flexible. Kids kind of arrive at them at different stages. So it wasn't as apparent that there was something going on. But I had felt so strongly that it was time for me to leave the management position and pursue a night's sleep, and basically create time during the day. So all of my working hours are done at night when I'm not needed as much. And because I get to sleep at work, which is pretty cool, my availability, both time and energy, is preserved for during the day. So that was, not knowing it at the time, I think that transition has actually been probably one of the most significant factors for just availability, coming and going, and kind of facing different things. And it's hard to quantify it, but I think accessibility, like for Kaleena to have access to me during the day, especially when things were more tough with Thea not sleeping and just being fussy, having a hard time eating and that kind of thing, like me being available, I think was really valuable. But it's hard to put like a time stamp on that. Like,
okay, yeah, what have we been doing? So practically, we've pursued therapy for her. So we knew that she was already going to have challenges with standing. So when we first started therapy, I don't even think she was even crawling. We did have like a couple of sessions of therapy right before we got the diagnosis, just because she was already behind the average child. And so our doctor recommended, like, it wouldn't be a bad thing to look into. If anything, it will like help her speed up the process. So we had started therapy. I think, like I said, we had about 2 sessions, and then we got her official diagnosis. And we've been doing therapy with one of our local centers here, which has been awesome because it's all funded. So we're not paying out of pocket for it, because that would be crazy. Like,
that's kids' ability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's doing it weekly or bi-weekly. She meets with a therapist, like depending on her needs and where she's at. So we do that for learning how to crawl, and she crawls now and she's standing, which is like a huge milestone for us. We have been working on it. It's really cool to see, like, as a parent, you just feel like you celebrate these things with them so much, and they have no clue really. It's like, just for them, it's their like natural development. They're like, oh, I can do this thing now. But as a parent, we're like, oh my gosh, we've worked on this for months. You don't know how big this is.
Especially with Thea, because like she, just watching her like labor to stand up, like she's just shaking, wiggling to like,
it's like a bodybuilder who is at like complete muscle failure, and you see them like everything in them is shaking to like lift that weight. That's her everyday life. That's her trying to stand, is like she's at max muscle capacity. So it is really inspiring. And like, I now can connect with those parents that say like, my kid is so inspiring. Like, you don't know it until you know it, like until you watch your child like really try to do something, and you understand as an adult how hard that is and like what her body is going through. So yeah, we've been working on our next milestone now is walking, and I feel like she's very close to that. And then feeding was something that we were working on a long time. Oh, that one was tough, because like as a parent, you're like, I need to make sure my kid's nourished and like thriving and like fueling their body to grow properly. And it was it was so hard. She just didn't have the dexterity. She didn't really know what to do with it in her mouth. And she would just like kind of put it in there and like spit it all out. So, I mean, I carried so much stress about that.
Yeah.
So we were working with like a speech and language pathologist and an occupational therapist as well. They kind of like work hand in hand for her like fine motor skills and eating and speaking. So she's a little over 2 and she's not saying anything really. She says dada. That's like the only word that she says clearly. And everything else is like not understandable. Like it's not a clear word or sound. So we're really working on that as well, because if anybody out there has had a toddler, you know how frustrating it can be when you're like, why are you throwing your food? Like, are you done eating? Are you just mad? Like, but I'm tired of picking up the food. So we're working on sign language with her too, just to see like maybe she'll pick that up quicker than verbals, like using words.
Well, it's kind of funny though. We do, like, she does kind of say num if she wants to eat something, which to me is kind of funny because it's like num num num.
Yeah, it's like Cookie Monster or something.
Yeah, but the first time, like, she didn't really have anything that she said to like really indicate that she wanted something. She would just kind of like squeal or like look at something, like
scream.
really bright-eyed. But one time we had a chocolate bar and I think we were eating it like close to her and she like kept trying to get, and then she was like num, and I was like, oh, you want that? Like, okay. And then so we gave her, so we're like, oh, all right, if you want to say num because you want to eat something, then sure.
But again, it's one of those moments where you can tell she was mustering everything inside of her to try and like project some sort of communication of like, that's what I want, is that thing.
Yeah, and it came out like the Cookie Monster. So
could be worse. I'll take Cookie Monster over other things.
Yeah, over squealing. Now it's just like, it's just kind of like nah.
Yeah.
And that's and then we know.
I feel like you guys ask us these like simple to the point questions, like, oh, what have you been doing practically for therapy or to help her? And we give you this whole spectrum of answers.
But that's life, right? Like it's never just a one word answer. That's, it's what we tell our kids and everything, right? So no, I think it's been, you even sharing with us, like I said earlier, I had never heard of this syndrome. And I thank you so much for sharing that information with us, right? And like you said, Kaleena, I spent some time on your blog, and the one last thing that stood out to me was that you said it's not the end of her story. It's just now that her story is different. Something along. I think I'm saying it wrong. But it's true, right? We may have these goals or different things that we envision our kids are going to live out.
Right.
But things change, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a different path that she's going to be taking.
Right.
So.
Yeah. I think too, maybe just one final thought on it. Just to put it in context too, like with our family and with Avery and Remington and how they respond to her. I think like we talked to them maybe in the last few months about her having Williams syndrome and that it's a little bit different and that she's developing a little bit different because of COVID. They've kind of been, I mean, we see other kids around, but we don't really like spend like one-on-one time with other families right now. So they don't have the grid for, hey, my friend's little sister or brother is like walking around, running and playing and talking to them, and Thea's not. So in their mind, like she's just like a baby and it's kind of like
stuck in this like baby
she
stage.
Continues to be a baby. So I'm hopeful that as Thea develops, that they also transition to feeling like she's a sibling that they can treat in the same way. But we were kind of just at bedtime praying about different things with the kids, and our daughter Avery said, I wish that Thea didn't have Williams syndrome. And I kind of paused for a second and I was like, I've thought about that too, Avery, but you know what? I don't think I would want Thea to be anybody else. I wouldn't want her to be any different than she is because I love her so much. And she's so interesting the way she is. And I would miss if she was different than who she is. And Avery kind of thought about it. I was like, yeah, I think you're right. but I get that sentiment, it's just how our family's kind of like, working through that stuff a little bit. Remington, I think, wants to play a little bit like rough and tumble, and like sometimes he just absolutely squashes her. I think he's entertained by how flexible she is. Like she just folds in half if he lays on top of her, kind of thing. And we're always like, hey, take it easy, and he's probably just like exploring like how mandible she is, so, but they love her, and they like want her to sit with them on the couch when they're watching shows and stuff, and they get down and hug her and kind of wrestle with her a little bit, and she's entertained by them too. Like they'll run around and she squeals and everybody is laughing about it, so that's good.
That's awesome. Now the one thing that we actually never jumped into was this the sleep shift that you work and how it's enabled you to be involved in some entrepreneurial endeavors. Mm-hmm. The one thing you talked about was the financial services when we kind of spoke before. Yeah. And you mentioned something that I hadn't heard of before, which is an RDSP. What exactly is that?
Sure. So it stands for Registered Disability Savings Program, or Plan, sorry. And that's probably the most easy comparison to that is an RESP, a Registered Education Savings Plan. In that, money that you put in attracts government grant to a certain amount. So to qualify for an RDSP, someone has to first qualify for the disability tax credit, and then you're eligible to open an RDSP. And it's basically, in my opinion, I think it's one of the most powerful wealth building tools for somebody who does experience disability. And by the way, that disability can be anything from mental health challenges to diabetes, and and more profound disabilities, kind of all in the spectrum. So once somebody qualifies for that and they can open an RDSP, it attracts government money like nothing else. So there are two streams. One is a government bond, which is basically just a cash amount that's up to $1,000 a year that you can even put no money in. But if you open an RDSP, it will attract that $1,000 a year from the government. And then the other part of it is a government grant, which is relative to how much you put in. And check this out. On the first $500 a year that someone puts into an RDSP, the government matches 300%. That's $1,500 in a year. Oh, you could spread out putting that $500 in over the course of a year, and the government will match and put in $1,500. There's no other, group RSP plan at work where you're getting 300% matching on the money that you put in. Even if somebody did not invest it, to get a 300% return on your money just by putting it in somewhere, like that's unheard of. Plus, you can actually invest that money, so you can seek long-term growth by investing that in funds that that are actively pursuing gains. So it's a super powerful tool, and it came across my desk because of a parent of somebody that I was supporting. I was a manager at a location, and one of the parents said, "Hey, have you heard about RDSPs? Everybody needs one. Like they're such amazing tools, and especially for a population that's very underserviced as far as financial services." And so I went to a workshop on it and was just kind of blown away by how powerful of a tool this could be. Just completely underutilized because they're not really promoted very much at banks, that kind of thing. It's not as far as the financial services industry goes, it's not, if you go into a bank, for instance, you'll see posters for RRSPs, RESPs, TFSAs, but you won't see a poster for an RDSP. I can't think of any place where I've really seen them advertised. And it's really built as a long-term wealth building tool because it does have it has a clawback system worked in. So you have to leave the money in that the government has put in for 10 years. So there's a 10-year timeline. And typically there are some more nitty-gritty details about it, like about, when you can take the money out and that kind of thing. But yeah, here's one last thing about it that's really exciting is that it's retroactive. So I'll just give you an example. So one of my clients is actually an acquaintance from high school, and I helped her apply for the disability tax credit just to see if she was eligible for it. She was eligible. So she actually got some money back through the CRA just for taxes, because she would have received tax breaks for previous years. So that part was retroactive. But then it's actually retroactive up to 10 years. So she was actually able to collect 10 years worth of back payments. So within a few months of opening her account, she had about $14,000 drop in from the government. Absolutely incredible, and now she's thinking about long-term putting money away, and she can see how powerful it is to be building up. I'm always excited to talk about it. I just kind of gave like a quick little, well, it wasn't that quick, sorry. That long-winded answer about what it is. But for me, that's the reason why I pursued getting a license, in order to help people with investing. And it kind of it marries two of my passions, which is kind of being proactive with finances and serving people who experience disability. It's kind of the perfect marriage of those two. And that's it. And then I was already kind of pursuing that. And then Thea came along and qualifies for the disability tax credit. We've opened an RDSB. So she's my personal poster child for RDSBs.
He's going to start like training her now. Like, if somebody asks you, this is what you tell them about RDSB.
No, that was really good information, because like I said, when you mentioned, I had never heard of it. So that is very, very helpful. Can we spend the last little bit talking about you guys as business partners and what you've done in the last few years?
Yeah, I wanted to start because I felt like I wanted to share some things about you that it would sound weird if you shared them by yourself.
Well, thank you for saving me from that.
But yeah, so we started, Jesse has always been, well, I won't say always, but longer than I have, he's been interested in investment properties. And I've just kind of like jumped on to the dream. The more that he had been like talking about it and sharing his vision, I kind of like caught that spark as well. And so a few years ago, how long was it since we got our first property?
I think it was 2017.
Okay. We were so like fortunate to be able to get our first property. And I will say, all these shows like on HGTV, they all make it look super easy and super quick. And I think people can quite easily get deflated when you're like out in the real world and you're like, what, I actually have to have money to like do these things? Or how much does a renovation cost? Because they just make these homes look so beautiful. And of course, people are going to want to rent them. Or if you're a flipper, you like go and sell it right away. But yeah, it takes time and it takes money, and it will be hard on your marriage. I will like just tell you that straight up. And as long as you're willing to like work through those things, it can be an amazing thing, but it is definitely challenging. And Jesse has definitely taken the lead on all of like the research, figuring out different financial routes we can go to make it happen. And like, that's somewhere where you have to be creative. I mean, unless you've been blessed with tons of money in your bank account, I know many of us have not, you need to get creative. And if you have a dream and a vision to do something, you have two choices. You can either be like, I'm not rich, I can't do that, or I want to do it really bad and I'm going to figure out how to make it happen. I'm going to find an avenue that I can take that will work for me. And like, Jesse is great at doing that type of research. And he came to me and he's like, okay, so here's some ideas. Like, this is what I think we can do. And I mean, we probably don't have enough time to get into the financials, and that is like different for each person, but I know it's something that Jesse's always happy to talk about. But we figured out a route for our first property, and we felt so blessed and so fortunate to be able to make that happen, and we still have it. So our kind of like dream and goal for those properties is like the long game. So some people will reno it and flip it, so you like sell it immediately. And for us, we prefer to hang on to like rental properties. So what we've been doing mostly is just acquiring single family homes and converting them into a duplex. So there's lots of details that go into that too, of why we chose this route. I mean, everybody's market is different too, but we felt like for the market that we're in, this is the model that kind of worked best for us, that would give us, I guess, the best bang for your buck, so to speak. And then we knew we wanted to keep trying to acquire more properties, but capital was a problem because, again, we're not rich and houses are expensive. So yeah, we kind of like went back to the drawing board with trying to figure out how to get our next property, because we couldn't use the same course of action that we did with the first one. And then, yeah, then do you want to take over the rest of the story?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So just a quick, so the first property, we worked out a strategy that worked for us. And then we had kind of hit our ceiling as far as mortgage availability and that kind of thing. And then for a while, I was really trying to learn as much as I could about partnerships and how could I sort of pitch the idea of partnering, like a joint venture kind of thing, but also trying to leave room for it to be a little bit more organic. And then essentially I had just a brief run-in with somebody that we used to know at a grocery store. And sort of from that brief conversation, got a message, hey, my husband wants to meet with you. He's got some ideas. And basically in the same week that I was telling my boss at work that I'm planning to make this transition at work, I ended up having a meeting with the gentleman who's now our partner. And he basically gave me the opportunity. It was like, if you were to structure a partnership right now, how would you do it? And I was like, I've been preparing for this for like the last couple of years. So I went home and I wrote out a couple of scenarios, much like on here, probably too wordy, but I wrote out a couple of scenarios. And basically the short of it, he was like, okay, I like option number 2. When do you want to start looking for houses? I was like, oh, what? This is actually happening. So with that partner, then in the last year and a half, we've acquired 4 duplexes. 2 of those we kind of did duplex conversions, but 4 duplexes and a commercial property, a small commercial property that we're just getting started with, trying to convert to a triplex. So
yeah,
it's been pretty busy with scaling that up. And I think for us, we've had to figure out how to like make things work. Like the first couple projects, I was basically like working all night and then like putting in like a full day and doing that for like a few days a week. And it was tough. It was tough at home. It was tough on me. It was tough on Kaleena.
Our first property too is about 45 minutes away from where we live. And we were doing everything on our own dollar. And so we were like very aware of that. And so Jesse was like determined to do most of the work himself to try and keep costs low. And so with commuting time, like 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back, he was gone a lot. And that was like our first taste of like what these types of projects would be like. And it was so hard. And we didn't have time blocking. We didn't have any of those things. So it just felt like almost like you're on a hamster wheel. You're just like running and trying to survive and like waiting until this thing is done.
Yeah.
And so
that was, I remember like when people have asked me like, how did that go? For a while, my first response was, it was probably the hardest 2 months of our marriage, which probably was. I still remember like this one moment where I was like holding up a sheet of drywall on the ceiling, like trying to screw it in. And I see that Kaleena's calling. And for some reason I take the call, like, and anyway, she's upset because I'm not at home and like needs me to be at home. And I'm like, don't you understand what's happening right now? Like I'm trying to put this sheet of drywall up. And I just remember like fuming. I just instantly started sweating. I was just enraged. And like, oh man, that moment was like, that was like the pinnacle of sort of like ultimate frustration for that project. So that comes back to me pretty clearly when I think about that. But so I think we're making some progress. I think we're, the last
definitely learning from mistakes isn't the right word, just experiences,
Yeah.
learning through like how things played out and like, I don't want that to happen again. So how can we still pursue this dream, but make sure we make it out alive? Like our marriage makes it out alive and doesn't like deteriorate while we're trying to achieve this dream that we think we both want, but we want it in different ways.
And the thing for me, I keep thinking about too, is I, purposely tried to create all this time. And some of it is for these projects and that kind of thing, but ultimately it was for my family. And I need to be present both physically and mentally at home. And, for what all of this means for down the road in the future and all of that, if I don't steward my time well now that I have created for being available to the kids and for Kaleena, then I'm just doing the same thing, just in a different, in a different way as I was before. So it is something that just trying to be aware of.
Yeah. So our most current project is probably the biggest one that we've ever done. So we're both kind of nervous how we're going to navigate this one, just like relationally and practically. But every time I feel like we hit like a bump in the road where things feel tough, I don't know, I just remind myself that like, just because things are challenging doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And like, that's what life is full of, just like challenges and bumps in the road. And you can sometimes just run the other way and say like, this is hard, I don't want to do this, I want nothing to do with it. Or if it's something that you want bad enough, you like figure out, okay, how do we work through this challenge? Because we have had people in our life who have been skeptical and just felt like, why are you guys doing this again? Because, you shared with me that this and that was so tough with your last one. Why would you put yourself through that again? But I just feel that just because something's hard doesn't mean you don't do it. I mean, and that's different for everybody, and it's different per case. There might be things that it's not worth it for you to continue doing it. But for us, we just feel like the challenges that we go through, those are things that we can overcome. And it's just a matter of trying to synchronize and communicate and figure out, okay, how do we get through this? So we're both excited and a little bit nervous because our most recent project is a commercial building. So it's three stories, and we want to convert it into like apartments. And so there's like literally like nothing in it. It's commercial, there's bathrooms, and that's it. So it is going to take quite a while for us to convert that, but we both have a pretty good vision for it, so that when it's done, I think it's going to look really cool.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah. And we're so grateful that we found a business partner, because like we said before, this would not be possible if we didn't have somebody who we could work with and kind of work together on this. And that really, it honestly feels like that part fell into place. Like Jesse had been looking for a business partner. It just felt like doors were kind of closing in that area. And then all of a sudden he had that encounter with a friend at the grocery store, and like they were just both in the same place, and same place, right time, same place in life, and it just like worked out.
I love that. I can appreciate when things like that happen. That's for sure. We're going into doing renovations in our own home in the next month. So you may get some DMs from me, because we had a talk and, just looking at, okay, how are we going to do? And we already started, disagreeing. Oh no, we should have this type of floor. I'm like, oh, this is going to be interesting.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's where like our headspace is different, right? Like I'm thinking about like, okay, these are going to be rental properties. So like, we want them to be durable. And we, just different things like.
And the bottom dollar.
Yeah.
It's just like, those cabinets are fine. We don't need to take them out. And I'm like, you want to rent this to somebody, right? Nobody wants those cabinets. Like,
no, okay. I'm not that bad. But just all those little things, like there have definitely been a couple times, this will probably sound terrible, but there's definitely been a couple times where I've been like, look, I've been the one reading this stuff, researching this. I'm making the decision about it. I have the information. And I'm going to try to do that differently this time. So yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you just have to find effective ways to break a tie. That's
Yeah. There you go.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Oh man. But no, I appreciate the vision you guys have for your family, and obviously doing this, and you don't always have to work that 9 to 5, right? There's different streams and different ways to bring in income to make it work for your family. And definitely, again, I appreciate how you guys are making things work for your family and leaving, a legacy for them as well, right?
Before you go, I want to make sure that we, for everybody who's with us, they have an opportunity to know how to contact you. So I know obviously you have your blog, you have your blog, Kaleena and Jesse. If anybody wants to get a hold of you in terms of financial services or anything else that you're doing, I just want to give you guys an opportunity to share how we do that.
Do you want to share you got a whole bunch of things that people can do to get a hold of you.
Should I just say, to get a hold of Jesse, just contact me?
She's not wrong. I mean,
we were talking about this earlier, and I was like, Jesse, you don't even use your Instagram. How is anybody going to find you? He's a man of mystery.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, you guys already know my blog, but I have a little old blog called osokaleena.com, and I'm probably most active on my Instagram, which is Cal Schultz, Kal Schultz. And then Jesse, how do people contact you?
You know what? I'll leave my email address if that's the best.
Sounds good.
Yeah. jesse.s.connect@gmail.com.
So, and just to confirm, so Jesse, what are the things that we can reach out to you for? Obviously, we talked about financial services.
Yeah. So financial services. So but I'm also happy to talk about real estate stuff. If anybody has questions or any more want to explore like local resources, there's some great guys on YouTube locally. There's some forums and stuff that I've got a lot of information from, and I'm happy to share those as well.
Oh, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and it was a very enjoyable conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.